So I mentioned siddhis already, or psychic powers that can arise as part of our purification process. And I mentioned siddhis in relation to the purification of Manipura chakra, the heart chakra, and the third eye. And so I wanted to say, don't get distracted by these siddhis. They can be very distracting for some people. When new powers open up, when new senses open up, it's a whole new world. But it's not liberation. It's not unity. It's not the goal of the spiritual path. It's not freedom from suffering. So, no matter how extraordinary the things are that arise on the spiritual path, don't let them distract you. Just stay focused and remember that the goal is liberation. It's not any particular siddhi. So Yogani once said that the only siddhi really worth cultivating is the siddhi of divine love. Okay, and I would agree with that. And that's a siddhi that arises with the opening of the heart. So the ability to love everyone and everything, that's a power that most people don't have, and that is a power worth cultivating, and that is one of the qualities of liberation. So that's something that comes with enlightenment. But apart from divine love, all the other siddhis that may arise on the journey are not worth holding on to, and they can be distractions. So treat them with a certain amount of caution. And so I've mentioned lower and higher beings already. What happens when we start to be able to see angels? What happens when we start to be able to see the spirits of people who have died? What happens if we start to see lower beings? And we can see these things, we also develop the ability to feel them. So that clairsentience that gets developed with the opening of the Manipura chakra and the heart chakra, that also works in terms of lower beings and higher beings, that we can feel these entities as well as seeing them. We can also hear them. There's a clairaudience psychic power that activates, which means that we can hear angels singing, things like that. Other subtle sounds can also be heard. Sounds like bells, or harps playing, or gongs, or crickets chirping. All sorts of strange and beautiful sounds can be heard. So sometimes these lower beings and these higher beings are just seen, and it's, we're just aware of them, and then we carry on with our life. Sometimes they can intervene with our lives, and when higher beings intervene with our lives, it's a very beautiful experience. When angels intervene with our life, it can be a very beautiful experience. And when lower beings intervene in our life, it's not necessarily a very enjoyable experience. So with angels usually won't intervene unless asked, unless invited. We can pray to angels, ask them to come. And when we have the ability to see them and feel them, then we know when they've come. We can watch them moving around, we can watch them doing their work. They usually don't spend very long doing anything. They act pretty quickly, and they're also very effective in their actions. So they usually don't come unless invited, but they might come if they're needed. If someone's in trouble, a higher being might just simply intervene to help them and then leave. So that's one useful way that we can interact with higher beings, through asking them to come and help when needed. Especially if someone else needs help, we can ask for higher beings to come to assist them. So as long as it's not becoming a distraction on the spiritual path, we can invite higher beings to come and help as and when needed. With the spirits of dead people, this is people who have died, they haven't been able to move on. We might be able to feel their presence, we might be able to see them in the room or see them in a building. Usually they're fairly harmless, and I mean it's someone who's just died and not been able to leave the place where they died, so their spirit is still there. And sometimes we can help them to move on. We can use prayer, calling on an angel might help to assist them to move on. But sometimes they just need to work out their karma, and we can just leave them alone and let them get on with it. With lower beings, these are beings that weren't human, so they've never been through a human birth, they haven't died, they're not ghosts. They're simply beings that exist in the lower astral realms. If they're bothering us or trying to interfere with our life, there are things that we can do if we notice that that's happening. One is to simply ignore them. They will quite often go away. They don't like being ignored. They're a little bit like children, and they'll go and find someone else who will interact with them. So simply ignoring them is often the easiest and simplest solution. If ignoring them doesn't work and they're continuing to bother us, there are things that can be done, and lighting incense, lighting candles, using sage, so smudge sticks, can be useful. Intent can be useful, just having the intent that this is your space where you practice, where you live, and they're not welcome there. Lower beings can respond to intent. And this is partly why the sage smudge stick things works, because it's a way of kind of symbolically laying out intent. This is protected space. And the same thing with candles. If even that doesn't work, if those things don't work, visualizing yourself surrounded by white light or golden light can be effective, and simply commanding things to leave. So silently, you don't have to speak out loud. That wouldn't make any difference anyway, because these beings can't hear physical speech. But internally, inside, just commanding that they leave, and they'll often respond to that. And the more sincere the command is, the more powerful the command is, the more they're likely to respond to it. If it's really coming from the heart and it's coming with inner strength, then they'll respond to that. And these are qualities that we develop on the path. The more we're on the path, the more time we spend on the spiritual path, the more inner strength we develop, the more we develop the ability to command situations, the more our ecstatic radiance will naturally repel anything that doesn't have our best interests at heart. So having problems with lower entities is actually something that generally only happens in the early stages of the spiritual path. Later on, we simply wouldn't have issues with lower entities, because they would be naturally repelled by the radiance coming from our bodies. So it's something that people have to deal with only in the early stages of the path, and most people don't have any issues with lower entities. They would simply move past that stage without having any problems, and then move into the higher stages of the path.